There's something deeply unsettling about watching a 5-year-old practice her sexy walk while holding a juice box.
Perfect. She is having a diva moment. Oh, okay, she don't want lipstick.
Not because it's chaotic or loud, but because every adult in the room is acting like this is completely normal. The mom is coaching, the judges are nodding, the camera crew is zooming in like they've just discovered the next global superstar.
Universal Royalty is one of the toughest competitions in the country. Work that stage, work it.
And the kid, somewhere between confused and overcaffeinated, is just trying to remember if she's supposed to wink before or after the hip sway, which is already a sentence that should not exist. Welcome to Toddlers and Tiaras, the show that took childhood, dipped it in glitter, and somehow deep fried it in controversy like that was always part of the plan. On the surface, it sold itself as something almost inspiring. A behind-the-scenes look at the competitive world of child beauty pageants, where confidence is built, talents are showcased, and tiny contestants learn discipline, stage presence.
She needs to be taken out of here.
And the fine art of smiling through emotional exhaustion. Parents called it a sport, judges called it performance, the network called it entertainment. And for a brief moment, people believed that. But the longer you watched, the harder it became to ignore the question quietly forming in the back of everyone's mind. Is this empowerment or just really well-lit exploitation? Long before it became internet shorthand for something feels legally questionable,
Universal Royalty Beauty Pageant right here in Austin, Texas.
Are y'all ready to get started?
Toddlers and Tiaras entered the world in 2009 as just another quirky addition to TLC's growing empire of look at these fascinating humans television. This was the same network that had already turned niche lifestyles into primetime spectacle. So naturally, following child beauty pageants felt like the next logical step in humanity's slow, very committed descent into televised oversharing.
Come with your game face on and get ready for competition, because it's going to be a showdown.
And to be fair, the timing was perfect. Reality TV was booming. Audiences were hungry for something outrageous yet oddly relatable, and child pageants already existed in that strange cultural gray zone where half the country saw them as harmless fun, and the other half saw them as, well, something that probably shouldn't involve spray tans for preschoolers.
I'm the princess.
My name is Eden Wood, and I want to win a big crown.
The show didn't invent pageantry. It just pointed a camera at it and said, hey, you might want to sit down for this. The format was simple, almost deceptively innocent. Each episode followed a handful of families preparing their children for competitions, showcasing rehearsals, costumes, emotional breakdowns, and eventually the big stage performance. There were crowns, trophies, and enough glitter to permanently alter the Earth's ecosystem.
I'm Jamie Sterling, and my 5 daughters will all be in the Universal Royalty Pageant.
It was structured like a sports documentary, if the athletes were under 10 and occasionally bribed with candy. And people watched. A lot of people watched. The show quickly became a cultural phenomenon, not just because it was entertaining, but because it felt like peeking behind a curtain most people didn't even know existed. By 2012, the franchise was strong enough to launch spin-offs like Here Comes Honey Boo Boo, which somehow took the chaos and turned it into even bigger ratings. Suddenly, these families weren't just part of a niche hobby. They were celebrities in their own bizarre cinematic universe. At first, the appeal was curiosity mixed with disbelief. Viewers tuned in with that classic reality TV mindset of, this is ridiculous, but I can't look away. It was colorful, dramatic, and just absurd enough to feel harmless.
I am competing with my twin sister. I like pageants because I win.
Parents framed it as confidence building. Kids seemed to enjoy the attention. Judges smiled, audiences clapped, and everything was wrapped in a shiny, feel-good narrative about ambition and self-expression. But underneath all that glitter, there was already something slightly off. Not obvious at first, not enough to turn people away, just enough to make you pause a second longer than you expected. And as it turns out, that pause was doing a lot of heavy lifting. At first, the weirdness of Toddlers and Tiaras felt like part of the charm.
We'll be competing in Universal Royalty. My newborn son, Kevin, will be competing in his first pageant.
It was bizarre, sure, but in that safe reality TV way where you could laugh, cringe, and still tell yourself this isn't that serious. It was. And the show made one critical mistake. It didn't pull back, it pushed further. Because the longer the camera stayed, the harder it became to pretend this was harmless fun with extra glitter. The cracks didn't explode overnight, they slipped in quietly.
Number 5, Ashlyn Sterling. No, you need to have a smile on your face.
One uncomfortable moment at a time. And then they stopped being easy to ignore.
Other girls, and I knew that that was a controversial issue with Barry and I, but he let me go ahead and do it.
One of the first real wait what moments came in 2011 when a 3-year-old named Paisley was dressed as Julia Roberts from Pretty Woman. Yes, that Pretty Woman. A toddler dressed as something very much not meant for a 3-year-old on national television. Not implied, not subtle, just fully committed. The internet didn't laugh. It paused. And when the internet pauses, that's usually not a great sign. Then it exploded. But instead of slowing down, the show did what reality TV always does. It escalated.
My God. Lipstick, and now I got some hair on my head.
Not long after, another contestant hit the stage as Dolly Parton with fake breasts, padding, full adult body parody on a 4-year-old. At that point, people weren't just uncomfortable, they were confused. Like, who is this for? Because it's definitely not the toddlers. Still, the show had an excuse. These were just extreme parents, outliers, a few bad decisions in an otherwise harmless world. That excuse didn't last, because then came the moments you couldn't laugh at.
Let's practice your magic, okay?
Okay.
And do you remember what you need to say?
A little bit.
Like the episode where a young girl, already crying, was forced to have her eyebrows waxed on camera. No distraction, no comfort, just pain, and a reminder to smile through it. Not quirky, not dramatic, just hard to watch. And then it got worse. Because if there's one rule in reality TV, it's this. If shock works, double it. Enter go-go juice. Which sounds cute, harmless, like something from a cartoon. It wasn't. It was a mix of Mountain Dew, Red Bull, and Pixie Sticks given to toddlers to keep their energy up during competitions. On camera. Not metaphorically, literally. At that point, the show stopped feeling chaotic. It felt calculated, and the audience noticed. Clips started circulating online, not as entertainment, but as evidence. Reaction videos blew up. Comment sections turned into debates. Entire Facebook groups formed with names like Take Toddlers and Tiaras Off the Air, which is never a great sign, historically speaking. People weren't hate watching anymore. They were questioning why they were watching at all.
You don't remember? Sweetheart, it's okay.
Like if Fortnite was?
And then the real world stepped in. In 2012, a mother filed a $30 million lawsuit claiming her 5-year-old daughter had been sexualized by how her performance was portrayed. Around the same time, a judge banned another mother from entering her child into pageants during a custody battle. That's when it shifted, because now it wasn't just controversy, it was consequence. Psychologists started weighing in. Terms like achievement by proxy entered the conversation. Critics called it exploitative, harmful, inevitable. One sociologist put it simply, kids are supposed to play with dolls, not become them. And suddenly the entire show looked different. The glitter wasn't fun anymore.
Stop that. I'm gonna get that little ham.
You are gonna look so spiffy.
It was distraction. Ratings started to drop, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough to signal something had changed. The curiosity was gone. The irony stopped being funny. People weren't entertained anymore. They were tired. Even the spin-offs couldn't escape it. Here Comes Honey Boo Boo pulled in massive ratings, but it dragged the franchise even deeper into chaos, especially when real-life scandals started bleeding into the spotlight. And by the time the original run ended in 2013, it didn't feel like a finale. It felt like relief. The writing wasn't just on the wall. It was spray-tanned, overexposed, and holding a trophy it didn't understand. And yet somehow, that still wasn't the end. By the time Toddlers and Tiaras tried to make a comeback in 2016, the internet had already made up its mind. This wasn't a guilty pleasure anymore, it was evidence. Not the kind you laugh at, but the kind you send to your friends with, "Explain this." Because once the shock wore off, people stopped asking, "Isn't this crazy?" and started asking something worse. Why does this even exist?
Universal Royalty Birthday Celebration Pageant. Are y'all ready to get started?
The biggest problem wasn't just the scandals, it was what those scandals exposed. The show didn't create extreme parenting, it rewarded it. The louder you were, the more screen time you got. And the more screen time you got, the more attention followed. Suddenly, being normal wasn't just boring, it was invisible, which in reality TV is basically the same thing. So parents didn't hold back, they escalated. Bigger costumes, louder routines, higher stakes, more pressure, more tears, and every now and then the mask slipped. You'd see moments where a kid clearly didn't want to perform anymore, but still got pushed on stage, smiling through tears like it was part of the choreography. Rehearsals stopped looking like practice and started looking like direction. Again, bigger smile, fix your face. It didn't feel like parenting anymore, it felt like production. And the audience noticed because there's a very specific kind of discomfort that hits when you realize you're not watching kids having fun, you're watching kids perform for adults.
But if we're sick, we're not going to the pageant, and we sure want to go so bad.
Which is a very different show. That's when everything flipped. The same moments that once felt over the top started to feel off, then wrong, then impossible to ignore. And the internet made sure of that. These clips didn't just air once and disappear, they lived forever. Looped, reposted, turned into memes. That famous clip of Kylie Apposey smiling became one of the most recognizable GIFs online, but stripped of context, it wasn't a person anymore, it was content, which is kind of the problem. And also the business model. Because the kids grew up, but the clips didn't. Former contestants talked about being recognized years later, about harassment, creepy messages, being reduced to a moment they didn't even fully understand at the time. What was once framed as exposure and opportunity started to look more like permanence. And suddenly the question wasn't just, is this weird, but who exactly benefited from this? Because it wasn't the kids, they aged out almost immediately. It wasn't the parents either, unless validation counts as a long-term reward. And it definitely wasn't the audience anymore, because at some point people stopped laughing and just felt uncomfortable watching it. That's when the illusion fully collapsed, because Toddlers and Tiaras only works if you believe it's harmless. And once that belief is gone, there's nothing left to enjoy. Just a format built on a line that got crossed so many times people forgot it was ever there. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. And here's the strangest part about Toddlers and Tiaras. For a very brief moment, it almost convinced people it was something meaningful. Not in a this is changing the world kind of way, but in that oddly persuasive reality TV illusion where chaos is framed as opportunity. There were flashes, tiny glitter-covered flashes where you could almost believe the narrative. Kids gaining confidence, parents bonding with their children, a weird little subculture presenting itself as discipline, performance, maybe even empowerment. But that illusion only works if you don't look too closely. Because the second you zoom out, the whole thing starts to feel less like a celebration of talent.
I'm real scared because if I mess up, then I can't be the top one.
And more like a system built on blurred boundaries. A place where childhood and performance got tangled together so tightly, it became hard to tell where one ended and the other began. And once that line disappears, everything else starts to feel off. That's why the show didn't just fade away. It burned out. Not because people suddenly stopped enjoying reality TV, but because this version stopped being fun to watch. The discomfort caught up with the entertainment. The satire wrote itself, which is usually when you know something has gone very wrong. And eventually, the audience did what reality TV fears the most. They looked away. What's left now is a cultural artifact that feels almost surreal in hindsight. A show that turned toddlers into performers, parents into producers, and audiences into slightly uncomfortable witnesses. Something that thrived on attention, but ultimately collapsed under the weight of it. And maybe that's the real legacy here. Not the crowns, not the catchphrases, not even the memes. But the question it leaves behind, if this counted as entertainment, what exactly were we entertained by? And more importantly, why did it take so long to ask that? Anyway, subscribe, and let me know which reality show should be gently escorted out of existence next.